I want to thank you, Ed, for hosting us here. This is like it's perfect because this shows we're rolling up our sleeves. We're working. We're in a trailer. We no AC cranking. It shows this is what this is about. I want to thank my team, particularly Sean, for taking the lead on organizing this. Kristen, who's gone to every site visit with Sean. Eric, who's my Vermont and Maine guy, but also interested in the Veterans Initiative as well. And of course Larry, who's there's only one Larry, and he's bilingual. He actually speaks techie and he speaks transit, and I think so that's a unique bridge that we needed here. Just want to give a little history of this program because I think this is what there's been some misunderstanding, and back in 2010 through 2011, the president challenged all of the cabinet secretaries to identify programs to benefit veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And at FTA, there was some debate as to how we do that, and there were the techies in our offices who wanted to invest in what they're calling one-call, one-click centers and all the high-tech infrastructure to make those happen. And then there were others of us who sort of actually buy into the role of public transportation and say what we really need is stuff that people ride, because that's the best way you can serve someone is to actually put stuff on the roads that take people where they want to go when they want to get there. The one-call, one-click center prevailed. And which certainly challenged a lot of us. In the first round, there was sort of $30 million made available, give or take, and then there was a second year, about another 30 was available. And I think the number of applicants was smaller than was expected, in part because not everyone understood what that meant. And because of that abstraction, those of you who did come in for funds, and you're all here. It was slower to implement than it might otherwise have been if it was a more traditional transit program. I think that's fair to say, and we're not picking on any of you because it was the same across the country. And I think you needed people like Larry, and there's only one Larry who could speak both techie and transit. Earlier in the year, CTA was hired to go through an analysis of all the grants and all the projects, and they sort of borrowed from Homeland Security and gave color codes to everyone. Larry hates the color codes because it's overly simplistic, but nevertheless, we're all graded on that, and so it was green, yellow, and red. And in the first go around, we had no greens, we had 4 yellows and 2 reds. And so our mission to Larry was to be Visine, to get the red out. And also we want to get the yellow out, so I don't know, it's gamma globulin.
That's much better than preparation H.
How does that get? Yeah, we don't even want to speculate what we're getting out there. And I think what we also don't want to lose sight on is that really what the goals are, at the end of the day, it's we want concrete deliverables that you don't have to have a PhD in nanotechnology to understand, and that's why we said no consultants here. We want it's got to be something that I can explain, that Ed can explain, that Sean can explain. That the administrators who once the consultants go away still understand what they're doing and will be able to keep it running. And then part of it is identify realistic dates for achieving these deliverables and a roadmap to get there. Ultimately, while we talk about a one-call, one-click center, the goal of the program is not that somebody answered my telephone call. The goal is that I'm able to get where I want to go. And so sometimes it's too easy to lose sight of that, and I think we want to always come back to that. We want to have a clear before and after. What are we buying with this program? So what is it that a veteran didn't have before this program started that they will have after it's implemented? And that's always, that's the nuts and bolts that we're looking at here. And so what we're doing, the goal for today is to do a workshop here. And by the way, we're the only region in FTA that's doing this. And certainly the only one doing it in a trailer too. The goal is to have all of you talk together, because ultimately for this to work, your programs are all going to have to be integrated. You can learn from things that are working in some areas that you can export or steal, and at the end of the day, there should be not just in your region a more comprehensive, vibrant network, but actually linked to the entire region. And ultimately, what's another thing that's challenging about this program is anytime we get into that human service element, we run into the conflict of vision for what is public transportation. Is it a safety net, or is it part of the infrastructure? And I think sometimes if you get too heavy on the safety net side, you become overly prescriptive, overly narrow. None of us should be in the business of determining eligibility. None of us should be in the business of saying this type of trip is eligible, this type is not, which is what our friends in human service do. Ultimately, I need a ride to get from here to there. It doesn't matter why I'm going there. Ain't nobody's business but my own. And I think we don't want to lose sight of that, and that's ultimately what it means to provide public transportation. So I'm going to turn it over to Ed right now, who will just officially welcome you here, and then Sean will provide some of the logistics, and Larry will then sort of direct the discussion of each of your programs and what your goals are.
Initiative grants that were awarded. What FTA Region 1 has done is we've conducted a site visit to 5 of the 6 grantees who received the VTCLI awards. Not that we didn't want to make it to Vermont, but we talked to Vermont a couple of times via conference call, and we're very well aware of the status of their grant. And what we found in talking to each of you is that there are some good stories to tell, and there are some good stories to share. And we thought today we would all sit down in the same room, look each other in the eye, and share that good news with each other, so that perhaps we can learn from each other. Noah earlier said that Region 1 was the only region in the country that pretty much captured the technical assistance from CTAA, which is Larry, and I think that shows that we take this program very seriously, consistent with the President's initiative. So we're here today to encourage you to share your story, to encourage you to learn from your colleagues, and I'd always like you to keep in mind an end date for completion of the grant elements that you committed to in the grant. And what we learned when we visited most of you was that some of the milestones initially set forth couldn't be met, and that's okay, and we're okay with that. Just send Chilean team, tell us why, and bump the milestone out with a logical and realistic explanation. In that sense, no different than any other FTA grant. But we'd like you to take the VTCLI grants and hold them almost to a different standard, because they really are different. They're targeted to veterans and their families, and at the end of the day, we want that veteran or family member to pick up the phone or click on their computer and be able to click once to say, I need to go from point A to point B, how do I do it? Or to make that call once, not get bounced around from agency to agency and department to department. That's really, the objective of this is to minimize the confusion, if you will, to the veteran. So if we keep that in mind, and nobody can tell veteran stories better than Ed, we keep that in mind, that we're here to help people as public transportation does, particularly with to be focused on veterans and their families. And we really do think there are some good stories to tell, particularly in the state of New Hampshire.
It's not an hour and a half away from here. More like 3 today.
But we have some good stories to tell, again, to share, to information share. Many of your grants have a technology component, and admittedly, IT technology is not my forte, but as Noah alluded to earlier, at the end of the day, I'd like to be able to explain to Mary Beth Mello what it is that each of you are doing without having to have a PhD in IT, for example. While it's an important component, and IT makes communication work, we'd like you to keep it down to the nuts and bolts of public transportation. How do our veterans and our families get where they need to go?
Just a couple of things I want to pick up on to kind of set the stage as Noah talks about it. One is I view this program as unique, and I started out in a new frontier in 1963 in federal government. Unique in many, many ways. First thing is, in recent times, we haven't seen a lot of discretionary grants that people competed for. This is an interesting program. It's $64 million. It's 124 grants, 68 projects, attempting to do all the same thing, which was establish a one-call, one-click center, enhance a one-call, click one center, and it's all focused on a group that's a little bit larger than our generation. It goes back to our father's generation, and it goes back to Brendan's generation, people coming back from Iraq. We all know somebody about that. So it's been one of those interesting times in which transit recipient had a clear face for me, and everybody bought into that. There may be a couple of grants that will be lost out of that 68 projects, but there won't be very many at all because they were by and large very good. They were all very different. I think what's unique about this is everybody had a different take on it around the country, how to solve the same thing, and that's interesting, how that's pulling off. Most of you have seen my little maps. I'm a cartographer by hobby more than anything else, but basically there's coverage throughout the world, the United States and territories is very well represented. Some of them interesting. I mean, we're small. New England is small. We can all get there, despite the fact that we had terrible traffic problems. We could literally drive to everything. And as long as we can factor that in sometimes, it's a heck of a lot better than asking everybody to pay airline things. And that's exactly what they have to do if you're out in Region 10 or Region 9 or Region 4 for that matter, which is larger ones. The second thing that's unique about us is we have some big ones. We have some really big $2 million grants, $1 million grant that was sitting here, and then we have some small ones as well. But all of us are doing the same thing. We can all talk about that. They were all legitimate. You didn't get the grant if you weren't good, if you didn't have a good application. There's some things I'm looking term in the long term. I'm Mr. Visine, they're calling me here, so I definitely will have no problem. Well, he calls me Mr. Preparation H, but I'm trying to get rid of that whole notion, actually. It's a bad image. But what we do have is, in the long run, we're going to end up, this is a book that took all of your projects, and it's a pretty thick book. And I'm telling you, there's going to be some accomplishments coming out of that. I want to make sure that it's right. So for all of us, before you leave today, I'll have what you wrote, or what has been designated as something you wrote, of what the project is. We can all make sure that whatever the changes are, when this thing goes out, it's right. And it's going to look good. Some of you have noted that my interest here is in interoperability. And I want to lead into that because, again, the unique thing about this is this sets the stage for the whole intelligent transportation system movement. And transit usually doesn't lead anything to do with ITS if you've been around. It's the highway guys that are really running that. But we're now at a point where we have, in 2 years, those vehicles will be talking to each other. We might not be talking to each other, but they'll be talking to each other as they drive along the roadway. We're the one entity that nationwide can make sure that those vehicles not only talk to themselves, but they talk to what we do. They talk to our computer systems. It has something to do with how rides are distributed. We've been working on this for a long time. It goes back to Haddonfield, New Jersey. It goes back to ADART a long time ago. The public has been trying to do this. This is the first time we've really, the technology, the rubber meets the road. The technology meets the rubber. So I think we have something a little bit special to do here. In New England, we're interesting because we've always got together. We may have family fights every now and then, but we've always been able to get together and work this thing out. In this program, I'm pretty excited after going through the tour that everybody has stood up and said, I will work with this person. I will work with this company. Literally all of the companies, the software companies, had said that they will work to us together on this. They just need some public leadership. And I think this meeting is the start of our public leadership. It gives us a chance to basically do a show and tell, where you basically explain to your colleagues, this is what I said I was going to do, this is where I am. And there's you should not be discouraged if it's not exactly what you said you were going to do, because if you did, it wouldn't be much of a project. We're carving new territory here, so we're going to be making changes as we go along and implement these projects. My thought is it's important that you all share among each other what works and what doesn't. So my thought here is, while I have my son Brendan taping this, because we've been taping this whole technology thing from the beginning, you have a capability to make a discussion where you can be candid. We'll turn the cameras off after you make your presentations, and I think what we need to do is be able to say, when this meeting's over, we can talk to each other. We can share what's going on. We can say things that you don't want on tape, but you really need to know in order to make this project work. So that was our intent for this meeting. I call it a show and tell because I'm basically a junior high school teacher at Tot. So what did you do for your vacation kind of thing? And I'd like to get to that right away. Does anybody have any problem with the intent? My thought was lead off, give yourself 5 minutes to say what it is. Don't try to be comprehensive because we'll try to get documents around later on, share them around as you can. And then try to tell us a little bit about what the status is, where you are. And then at the end, I'll go around again with the discussion and we should see where do we want to take this.